Very happy to see everyone. Uh, so today, what we have is we have a guest, and if you've been on these coaching calls, just to give you a format, my name is Amir Khan. I host these calls weekly. They are for the benefit of newbies. So if you're a newbie, you're in great place. If you're not a newbie, that's even better. And the way it works is I encourage everyone to ask question. I just ask that you ask one question and on topic. The calls are only 40 minutes long, so we cannot just go on and on. So that's why the calls are shorter. The formats are sometimes I choose a topic and I talk about the topic, and sometimes I have a guest. Today we have a great guest, Cheyenne Brothers, who also fills for the community and is, of course, member of the community. So we're going to be interviewing her. And I want you to know as early as now is I don't monitor the chat, so please do not put your questions in the chat. You would need to use the react option in Zoom and raise your hand, and you can do during the interview. As soon as the interview ends, I have some questions that I'm going to be asking Cheyenne, and after that, we'll just go through the questions. All right. So having said that, Cheyenne, welcome. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi,
How are you?
good. How are you?
Wonderful. So Cheyenne, some of the questions you probably already know that I was going to ask you, but let's just start with just telling us about yourself, where you live, what's your background, if you had any prior real estate experience. So going into the slow flip program, and then I'll ask specific questions.
Okay. So no, I personally did not have any real estate background whatsoever. My husband was a realtor for about 5 years. He's in law enforcement, and so he came out of law enforcement for about 5 years, did real estate, realized that law enforcement was his passion, so he went back into law enforcement. So that really was my only experience with real estate at all. I'm from the medical field. But currently, I left that back in 2017. And so I am a stay-at-home mom and I homeschool our three youngest children. So I'm a mom of five. My two oldest are grown, college aged. And then I have three younger children, 13, 12, and 6, that I homeschool in the mornings and then kind of do this throughout the day in between after.
That's wonderful. I have three kids. My older ones, the oldest one is working already. The second one is in college, but my daughter is homeschooled, so I can understand that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Cheyenne, can you tell us when did you join the Freedom Accelerator program?
We joined in November of 2023.
Perfect. And when did you buy your first slow flip?
In March of 2024. So about 4 months later.
So tell us that period. Like, what was the biggest challenge that you had at that time, buying your first slow flip?
Um, so I don't know that we really had a challenge in buying our first slow flip. We came into the program, we were very blessed. We came into the program and we found private money lender pretty quickly out of the gate. Um, I really just wanted to get through the curriculum and really follow Scott's curriculum like he suggests. I wanted to do all the things. I wanted to watch all the videos, look at 100 houses everywhere, and really just do everything that he suggests. And so I wanted to just take my time. And we had the funding, we had the means, we had connections to wholesalers. I just didn't want to do it until we found and we were ready pretty much.
Okay, wonderful. So since you mentioned your first private money lender, would you like to share how you got your first private money lender?
So just in talking to other people, and we were lucky to have family who had the means and the opportunity to lend to us.
Okay, wonderful. Okay,
Yeah.
now I know filling is part of the thing. So why don't you just clarify that for us and for me also, so we understand. Obviously, you fill also, which is part of the things that you do. So that we understand how much time do you put on filling properties because it does take time and effort, and how much time do you focus on your own slow flip, and maybe you do wholesale, because I haven't seen any properties that you've wholesale. But just kind of tell us your breakdown on that.
So I probably have it a little backwards. I probably spend more time filling than I do working on my own personal business. So the majority of my day is spent filling. And that's just where I spend the majority of my time. I wake up, and obviously my kids are priority and homeschooling is a priority, but as soon as we finish in that sense, the rest of my day is dedicated essentially to filling. And then my husband essentially kind of runs our business in his free time, and then I will kind of pick up the slack in that sense when he's unable to. But I tend to dedicate the majority of my time to filling, and I've had quite a few members of the community kind of smack me on the hand on that one and say, you really need to put your business first, and then filling second. But I'm kind of a sucker for being a helper sometimes.
So let me ask you, because I'm curious, because filling is hard. I mean, just the amount of work and how challenging it is. So I'm assuming, do you like the process?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, so I don't want to say it's not something that I want to be doing 20 years from now. But for now, it is definitely something that I am grateful for. And coming into the business, it has definitely given me a different perspective and a completely different appreciation for slow flips. And I think it's positioned me in the community to be able to help out a lot of the newer folks in just a different capacity that I don't think I'd be able to help out if I wasn't filling or didn't have that experience. And so I'm extremely grateful for having that perspective that I don't think I'd have if I wasn't filling.
Okay, perfect. So let's just start with your first property. Did you fill it yourself, or did you have somebody else help you with that?
So I did not. So I was filling at the time, but I did not fill it myself. So I did have another filler who filled it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So now, for everybody's benefit, now that you're filling in the community, can you tell everyone what is the entire slow flip model, filling model? So what is the first thing that has to be done? What is the Tell us the what's happening in the back end, because a lot of people don't actually know all the activities that you're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, sometimes it is confusing, because especially if somebody is having several people do the filling, we're not 100% sure who's doing what,
Mm-hmm.
and some people have secondary people working for them. So when a property is filled, you have those secondary people contact us. And I've had people call me and say, "Oh, I got your down payment ready." And I said, "Who are you?" So just tell us so that everybody's kind of understand the process, please.
Right. Yeah. So obviously you close on a property and then you're going to communicate through the form in school or whatnot that you have a property that's ready to be filled. So we're all in a group chat together. And so that's going to get communicated usually through Joey or Cameron or somebody that's going to get communicated.
Sorry to
Nope, you're
interrupt
fine.
you. Can you clarify that, because that was new for me? When you mentioned the group chat, can you clarify that this is a
Yeah.
specific group chat
Yes.
for all the fillers, please?
Yes, correct. Yep. So the fillers have a group chat that we are a part of, and that we all communicate in the group chat, just to keep everybody in the loop. So that way, if somebody takes a down payment, or if we take a deposit, or let's just say the keys are missing out of a lockbox, or somebody's squatting in a property, God forbid, but it does happen. If there are any significant issues, like I posted earlier today, there's a buyer that I put in a property 6 months ago who's being evicted, and now they're out searching for a new property.
Mhm.
So, like, I just shared screenshots of what their Facebook profile looked like, what their names are, and we obviously have, a do not sell list or a blacklist where we put their names, but it's also helpful to know what their Facebook profiles look like. And so we just communicate, things of that nature. And so we're all in this group chat together. And
Okay.
anytime new properties are submitted, that gets shared along with, the pictures, the pricing information, the lockbox code, anything pertinent that you as the seller submit gets shared in that group chat so that we all have that. And then we get the property listed. And that's where we all kind of are a little bit different, but we list it through social media, however we get it listed. And then that's when we really start fielding all of the messages, the phone calls, the questions, and set up the viewings to get people in and viewing your property and ultimately trying to find you a buyer. And as Amir said, some people do have, VAs working for them, or they have assistants working for them who are not in the SlowFlip community. I personally, my sister works with me. Now, I would not have her contact one of you, like I would be the one contacting you, but that's again where each of us work a little bit differently. But the goal is to get your property filled and find you a buyer. And so once we find you a buyer, that's when we would communicate again to the group and let the group know we found a buyer or we've, collected a down payment or a deposit, whatever the situation may be. And then we would also communicate that to you as a seller that we found a buyer for your property, and then kind of move forward with writing the paperwork, either the deposit or the contract, and moving forward with you one-on-one as the seller to get that kind of closed, depending on where the property is and what the requirements are.
All right. So one of the questions that I also get during our calls, and I've seen on the forum, is especially from newbies about how to price their new SlowFlip, and they get into this rabbit hole of over analyzing things. Tell us, because fillers are doing this every day. You have so much information about what's going on in the market. You have data. So tell us that process, how you help people come up with the whole structure, like what should be the actual sales price, what should be the monthly down payment and all that. So tell us why people should be listening to the fillers, because this is based on your experience. So can you help clarify that?
Yep, absolutely. So there are times that sellers come to me and they just say, this is the monthly price, this is the sales price. And I think, Amir, you and I have had conversations before like this. And there are times where I'll just take it, okay, it is what it is. But if I run comps on those properties and it is extremely like off the wall, and again, I'm speaking for myself, I can't speak to what everybody else does. I will come back and say, hey, I just ran comps on your property. And again, I use a multitude of different softwares, and I just take the average. That's what I personally do. And I will go back to that seller and say, hey, I understand this is what you have, but running comps on that property, I know you may want 950, but the comps are coming back like at 8. And we can try to list it at 950, but based on the comps, based on this area, I don't really think you're going to get 950. You can list it there and it may sit for a while. We may have to drop it quickly. Or like with the down payment, if you want to list it at, 4,500, but I know the area and I have a multitude of other properties and they're all listed at 2,000. I know all of those properties are going to go way before yours is going to go because yours is listed at twice the down payment. And so that's where it does, like you were saying, it comes in handy having fillers, especially if it's in an area that we work in a lot. Now, if it's in an off area that we're not used to filling in, or it's in a brand new market, we're not going to have that historical data to go off of. But in our normal markets that we're working in frequently, it is, helpful to have those conversations with your fillers, because we do and we are listing a multitude of properties, and typically running comps on a pretty regular basis. Even if we're not listing the properties, I have people come to me with properties regularly. Can you just run comps on this property and tell me what you get? So I may not be listing that property, but I'm still running comps regularly on properties in that area.
Okay, wonderful. So everybody in the audience, if you have questions, you can go ahead and start raising your hands using Zoom. Click on React and raise your hand. because as soon as we get towards the end of the call, I'll start taking questions. So Cheyenne, let's have this discussion, which is sometimes a little uncomfortable in talking about it because it is happening and it does happen, especially for newbies. It may be an issue. Here's the issue. If you're a newbie and you decided to buy from a wholesaler in the community, uh, some wholesalers are very experienced. You know, they would tell you, okay, this is what our estimate is, this is what it will sell for, this is what it would rent for, and down payment, blah, blah, blah. They just take that as a given.
Hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And that's now embedded in their mind. Oh, I did all my math, everything based on these numbers, so that's what I want my fillers to do.
Hmm.
So I know, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I guess all I'm trying to get some information from you is to, and should be that at the end, you're the main decision maker. You should be the one to make that decision about what the numbers should be. What's
Right.
your opinion on that?
No, I agree absolutely 100%. I think I think getting your numbers from the wholesaler, from anyone, from me, whoever it may be, that's a good starting point.
Mm.
But it does not hurt. And if anything, it's just going to be beneficial to get numbers, comps, whatever you want to call it, from different sources, because we all use different means to pull those numbers. And so the way that I run comps is going to be completely different than the way that Joey run comps, or Cameron runs comps, or Sabrina or Scotty or whoever it may be that you ask to run comps for you. We're all going to do it completely different. And so if I say your property could pull 950, Joey may say 900, Cameron may say 875. So take those numbers and then take an average, and then you know that that's probably a much safer bet than just going with one avenue and taking it as the Bible and assuming that we're going to do this and we're going to stick with it. And then when it doesn't happen, you're disappointed or you're upset with someone, or you've wasted potentially weeks waiting for your property to fill. And, it could have had a better outcome had you have gotten more information or done more due diligence.
Okay, perfect. Can you also clarify? I know most people know this, but some people are new. How are you compensated and what's included in your fee? And also, how does the seller pay you? How do you collect down payment from the tenant buyer? And how do you transfer those funds to the seller?
Yep. So across the board, all fillers are half of the down payment. And as far as collecting the down payment, typically when we find a buyer, the buyer is 9 times out of 10, they're going to pay us the down payment, just because we're the ones handling that transaction. And then we would forward you the other half. I would say maybe one or two of the transactions that I've done has a seller been set up and ready to go with like Buildium, and the buyer has wanted to pay through Buildium, just because of Pay Near Me or something like that. And then the seller has had to forward me my half. But typically, the buyer is either paying like Cash App or something to me, or they're meeting one of my people. And then my people will deposit it into my bank account. And then I will forward it to you in a way that you and I agree on, whether it's through Cash App or through Venmo or Zelle. Or personally, I'm set up with just about everything, and I try to make it as easy as possible. Now, I will say in Illinois, because of the 3-day cooling off period, one thing that I do personally do is I tend to hold those funds for 3 days, just
Hmm.
because buyers can come back and change their mind
Right.
within those 3 days and want their money back. And personally, I have had a seller within our community almost refuse to give me his half of the
Oh,
down payment back,
that's not
and
good.
I almost got my butt in hot water.
Yeah,
And I almost had to refund the buyer out of my pocket, the
yeah,
seller's half of the down payment. So since then, I've just kind of, and it's not anything against anybody. It's just until that 3 days is up,
sure.
I just hold on to the money just to make sure the buyer's not going to change their mind, and then forward it on, just to make sure that I don't get stuck paying out of my pocket if the buyer does rescind
Perfect.
on that during their cooling off period.
Can you tell us what cities are you currently filling?
Sure. So I am all over Illinois, Missouri. I'm in Alabama. My Alabama contract is currently being reviewed by an attorney. So I have contracts in those three states. And then I'm filling in other states, but the other states, the contract is being provided by the seller. And
Okay.
so the sellers are doing their own contract in the other states.
All right. So since we're talking about the contracts, specifically, let's talk about Illinois.
Mhm.
What are you doing in terms of doing the notarization process?
So depending on where it is, if it's somewhere like Decatur, I have a team in Decatur, so I will typically just set them up with my notary and they'll meet in person and pay in person and sign everything in person with one of my notaries there. If it's not in person, if it's somewhere in East St. Louis area, I still have access to an in-person notary. So it just depends on scheduling in that area. And then it also depends on the buyer. A lot of buyers are still okay paying electronically and signing electronically. And so if that's the case, then again, we kind of resort back to paying via Cash App and then signing. I use Blue Notary if we're doing it online because
Hmm.
they are Illinois compliant. And so if it is an online notary, I just use them because I know I've worked with them plenty and I know that they're compliant with the state of Illinois regulations.
Perfect. So, about the cost, um, who pays for the cost of notarizing documents, both on the tenant buyer side and on the buyer on the seller side?
So again, this is where I vary a little bit. When I sell a property or when I find a buyer, I have the buyer pay closing costs. And so I collect $150 anytime I close on a property. And so that $150 covers the tenant buyer and their notary fees. And then whatever's left, I forward on to the seller to either cover their notary fees or it was designed to cover the cost of recording your contract in Illinois.
Got it.
Because generally, like for my personal properties, if I'm notarizing it, I just take it to my bank and it's free. But if you wanted to use the remainder of those closing costs to cover your notary fees, you could absolutely do that because it's yours to do what you want.
Right, right. Okay, wonderful. What are the services that you offer that complement filling?
So pretty much whatever I mean you guys need. Um, yeah.
So one of the questions that comes up is the lockbox. Can
hmm
you just tell us how easy it is? People just get so bogged down. Oh my God, how are we going to do this? Tell them how easy it is and how would you go about it?
So yeah, you close on a property and you need a lockbox put on it. Assuming it's in one of our normal markets, I'm just gonna make a phone call and have one of our guys go pick up a lockbox and put it on the property. It's probably gonna cost you maybe $40. Yeah, and take maybe 30 or 40 minutes to be done.
Right. What's your advice for somebody who's needing help filling and it's their first slow flip?
Um, so I think one of the biggest pieces of advice, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, and I tell this to everybody who calls me, um, treat it like an interview, to be honest with you. If you're calling me or you're calling anyone else, um, I'm being paid a pretty decent amount to fill your properties. And if somebody calls me and they have questions, I have no problem getting on the phone and answering your questions, whether it's about Illinois statute or about what I do as a filler, about running comps on your property, whatever it may be. If you want to read through my contract, you can absolutely read through my contract. Um, you know, I just, it just goes back to doing your due diligence and knowing what services are being provided to you. If you have questions, just knowing that the communication is there and it's an open line and knowing that somebody's going to answer your questions um, and just having that communication.
Okay. And the last question I have is, and if somebody wants to Have you filled for them? What is the process? Is it just easier for them to just DM you? What kind of information you need so you have enough information to start the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep, you could DM me. My phone number is listed in the everything in one place. I personally have my own intake form, just to collect all the information about your property, that I use. A lot of people already have it, but yeah, just shoot me a message on school, or I'll give you my phone number. You can shoot me a text message and I can send it to you. But I just collect your information through a Google form and copy and paste everything onto my marketing sheet, so that way I have everything, um, and do it that way.
Okay. All right, perfect. So we are ready to start taking questions. Again, if you have questions, click on the react button in Zoom and click on raise hand so we can take your question. Our first question is Zach. Go ahead, unmute yourself, please.
Hey, thank you. Hey, Cheyenne, thank you so
Hi.
much for sharing. And then thanks, Amir, for asking such great questions. You kind of like, ask all the questions that I have in my mind. Yeah, I'm like very new and I haven't, I have, one property under contract, which I will be filing soon after that is closed. So it's good to hear, how the process looks like. So I have a bunch of questions. So I will ask a few and then, get other chance to speak. So I think the first question that I have is, you know, like when you are failing, right? Like, so I know like some of the cities are, when I look at it, right, some of the cities that we operate in are smaller, some are bigger, like St. Louis, right? So is it longer to fail in smaller cities like Data?
It just depends. So no, it just depends. It all depends on the quality of your house. But no, I mean Decatur's my main market, to be honest with you. I'm a fan of Decatur. But I've had properties in Decatur sell in hours. I've had properties in Decatur sell in months. I've had properties in St. Louis sell in hours or sell in months. Same with East St. Louis, Belleville, Alton. Um, and so I don't think it matters. Now, if we're talking small, tiny cities, towns that nobody's ever heard of, that may be a little different. But cities that we're active in, I've not noticed a difference just because of the city.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome.
So
Yeah.
Zach, hold on just a moment. I'll let you back in because that is a very interesting thing because Cheyenne, this is interesting. So I've seen in the last at least 3 weeks a whole bunch of wholesaler deals that have come on school, and I tell you, some of these cities have less people living in the entire city. A whole bunch of more people live in my block, like
Mm-hmm.
where I am in my subdivision. I mean, the city has 100 people. So that would be definitely an extreme, right? So what is your opinion on it? Because obviously those look like great deals. I mean, I admit they look really good, but 150 people, have you filled any one of those cities?
So, and I don't know specifically which ones you're talking about, so I can't speak to them specifically. I have had people reach out to me about smaller towns. And one thing that I always tell everybody is ghost ads. I mean, it just goes back to ghost
Hmm.
ads. And if the wholesaler themselves hasn't run a ghost ad and they can't provide you with that feedback, I would run one yourself before you jump into that. Just because I wouldn't want to get into a contract and obligate yourself to a property without knowing what kind of market is there. Personally, I like Walmarts, I like Lowe's, I like Dollar Generals, and if they're not in the city, I like them relatively close to the city. So if that's always good because it shows growth, it shows job opportunities. They all put a lot of market research before they build. Um, but again, I want to see ghost ads before we're talking smaller cities, and before buying in those smaller cities.
Great. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one more question. Like, can we start marketing these properties that you have under contract with the wholesaler before closing?
I would not. And so the reason why I say that is, number one, you don't know if you're going to have access to the property, which is a big thing. We typically, depending on where it is, and again, the quality of the house and stuff, but we typically start getting messages and requests for viewings within the first 24, 48 hours after we list a property. And so you don't want to list a property if it's not available for viewings, because then people will just think it's a scam. But then the other issue is insurance. You know, I wouldn't want to put somebody on a property that is not properly insured and then something happen. And, you know, if they get hurt or bit or, you know, just something happens, the seller of the property is, then it's going to turn into a whole huge lawsuit of, you know, who does what and everything else, because they're going to be unhappy that you sent somebody out there. And, you know, you don't want them to pull out of the contract because they find out that you're now selling it to someone else. And it's a whole huge gray area that I don't think you want to get into. So I usually tell people, once you've closed on the property, like the day of closing, once you get notification, we can list it immediately then. So we can have everything prepared and ready to go, you know, once you close. But I'm not a fan of listing it before closing.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you, Sharon.
No problem.
All right. So does anybody else have a question? Raise your hand. Go ahead, Bob.
Hello, Cheyenne. Thank you very much. And Amir, this excellent presentation. For someone who's never gone through the filling process, meaning having you or the team fill it, are there things such as whether it's contracts that they should already have in place, even though they've closed on the house and you're filling it, that they're not really prepared? Is that too vague?
I don't completely understand what you mean.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, for example, let's go back to the contracts. You and the other fillers that work in certain areas, you have the contracts that are acceptable.
Yes.
But if you're not in that state, then they would need to bring those contracts to you.
So like, and I'm just gonna answer, and you telling me if I'm completely off base. I'm marketing in West Virginia and Michigan right now. I do not have a contract for West Virginia or Michigan. The sellers have those contracts. And so if I were to bring a buyer for Michigan or West Virginia, the seller would do their own contract. If they wanted to share the contract with me and have me fill it out for them, I would absolutely fill the contract out for them. But I do not have the contract for either of those states. And I was very transparent with them going into it and just let them know I will absolutely market it. I will find a buyer if I can, and do the whole filling aspect. I just don't have a contract to bring to the table. And in both of those situations, they, you know, and I think also Indiana right now, actually, now that I think about it, in all of those situations, the sellers already had their contracts and were fine providing the contract. They just didn't want to be the one marketing it.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, that
Okay.
answers it very clearly.
Okay.
Much better than how I phrased the question.
Okay.
Now, when the buyer, do you help set up the payment method for the buyer to be paying on the regular basis, or does the seller step in after the contract and the down payment to arrange monthly payments?
That's a great question. So once the initial transaction has finalized, I will take the down payment, I will complete the contract, get it all tied up nice and pretty as far as the buyer's concerned, and then I pass it on to you for you to sign. And then once you've signed, you should provide a final copy to the buyer. But during that process, I will also provide to you all of the buyer's contact information. And in that period of time is when you would want to reach out to your buyer and send some kind of welcome email and just introducing yourself however you want to be introduced. So like personally, I introduce myself as, I'm the property manager for Home Buyers Headquarters. I'll be your point of contact. Here's a few things that you need to be aware of. I provide dwelling insurance, so I just explain to them what that means and the expectation that they get a renter's policy. I use Inago, and so I provide them the link to sign up. I also send them the link from Inago directly. And so just my email just explains a few things of what the expectation is back and forth. Call the power company for this, call the water company for that. And so at that point is when you would want to, introduce yourself and communicate and, just kind of start that. But as far as your monthly payments, you would want to set them up with whatever system you're using and just kind of explain that in your introduction to them.
Excellent. That answered a lot of questions. Thank you. Thank
You're
you very
welcome.
much.
Okay, so we've only got 3 minutes left. So Alfred, go ahead, please.
Okay, hey Cheyenne, real quick, you filled one for me at University in Decatur, and there was some violence over there. My tenant buyer got spooked. He wants to move out. If he leaves, there's some paperwork he has to sign, correct? And what do I do with that? Can I start marketing it right now? It's vacant because there were gunshots and they broke in. Can I start marketing that one even though he's still the tenant buyer right now?
So you would want to file your special warranty deed and or a termination agreement if you got him to sign a termination agreement. Ideally, you'd want to get a termination agreement.
Yeah, I don't have one of those yet set up.
If you're still communicating with him, I would try to get a termination agreement just so that way it shows that he left willingly.
Okay, he's actually asking me if he could move into another one that I have there in Decatur on Division Street. So that he's a great payer. So I would get the termination agreement and he could just move right into the other one, correct?
Yep.
All right, I'll square that up with them tomorrow. Thank you.
Yep, we can talk offline too.
Okay, thanks.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you, Cheyenne, for your time. And if you have questions or, of course, if you need help filling, please directly connect with Cheyenne. And we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, guys.